Okay, so in this video, I want to tell you about the timeline of my own healing journey of overcoming depression, CPTSD, trauma, anxiety, and high degree of burnout. So hopefully this is gonna help you a little bit to recognize maybe where you are on that journey and give the timelines and some steps that you could be taking if you kind of wanted to get to a similar point.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Brook. I'm an ecosomatic therapist and regenerative well-being advocate. And I help people overcome that constant burnout, survival, and overwhelm and open up to life. If this resonates, please like and subscribe to my channel and let me know in the comments what you think.
So I guess my journey started with, depression. I was, quite severely depressed. We are looking many years ago. I had trauma and PTSD. I had anxiety, and eventually, I kind of worked myself to the point of burnout. So this is kind of what was going on for me. Um, and I guess for around 10 or 15 years, I got really dedicated to meditation in yoga as a way to find some resolutions to what I was experiencing, to all my different kind of issues. So I really engaged with that. I also engaged with a lot of different things, just everything I could find to kind of find some answers, and as well as a lot of psychoeducation. So I was really learning as a lot. I always enjoyed psychology, so I really kind of spent a lot of time also building my knowledge about what's happening um, for me and how to change that. So that was a good 10-15 years, and alongside I built a very successful career. I used to work in like one of the world's top companies, and eventually I ended up with really bad burnout. And this made me realize that even though I had a lot of awareness and a lot of already tools and skills, I wasn't quite where I need to be. In fact, I was really frustrated because I felt like I tried everything and here I am burning out. Like, will I ever get better? Will I ever be happy? There was this really sense of like, I am done with this bloody healing journey. Like, and it's not that things weren't improving, because along that journey I had many kind of insights, many small transformation and changes. My life was improving, but there was this sense of there's something still that is just not shifting. I was still kind of stuck in some way. This is where I started to engage a little bit different with myself, and I guess with my body. And I started to recognize that my body is also alive, and it's a kind of intelligent, feeling organism with its own needs and desires, and that I am in fact my body, right? So typically and historically we have this kind of disconnection of mind, being this everything, and the body is this meat suit that we move around, or it's just not very animate. But I started to realize that that is actually not true, and that in fact my body have its own voice and its own intelligence, and it's deeply rooted wisdom that I started to kind of connect with. And this just started to change everything, really. I think that part, it was, I think, around 2 years, I would say, from when I started to kind of invest into the relationship with my body, towards me waking up one day and realizing like everything is different. And I couldn't put my finger to it, because I still was me, I still was in the same place, but somehow everything was different. And I was doing my PhD at that time, and I remember, I was looking for participants for a project when I wanted to interview people to understand how they understand mental well-being. So I went to these Facebook groups to find those participants. And, in one of these groups, I just started to read stuff of what people were posting. And I was like, yeah, I recognize that, but I can no longer identify myself with this. And I remember thinking, I'm no longer mentally ill, that it's a weird thing to say to yourself and to others, but it was really like, I was kind of shocked to recognize that of like, oh, something really, really changed. There was this shift when things started to be very different. And what was different was that I started to recognize my own kind of value in this world, I suppose. I started to really show myself much more compassion and self-love in recognizing of no, I matter and my needs and feelings matter, and I have a right to exist in this world and feel happy and have good life. And it was a real deep like sense of like no, I deserve to be happy. um, and this started to then really shift the boundaries and relationships I was having. And in a way, because sometimes when we talk about boundaries, we want to practice boundaries, or like we think what to say and what to do. It's kind of, we have to do a lot of work in that. But what I started to find was like that actually boundaries become kind of natural to me, because when there was things that crossed my boundaries and didn't align, I started to have this sense of like no, this is not right, this is definitely not right, and I don't accept it. And even though sometimes, from the old habits and old behaviors, I still, things would happen and I still would let sometimes people to cross my boundaries, but there was this sense of like no, that doesn't feel right anymore. um, and I really started to operate in very different way. um, I also started to gain a lot of confidence in myself, because I feel like, for most of my life, I kind of felt anxious and awkward. And even I did a lot of posturing and looking confident and being super, to look at me working at my big company, right? But actually, underneath, there was this imposter syndrome and this like hiding and, people pleasing and like feeling awkward and weird and broken. But that was no longer the case. I started to feel confident with myself. I started to feel like, no, actually, I'm not a bad person. I've I'm a human, right? I can make mistakes, and I will make mistakes, and I am making mistakes, sure, but that's a human thing to do. Um, I also started to get a lot of clarities of what is right and wrong for me. Before I would always, especially in relationships, I would always just like second guess myself about everything and trying to figure things out. Am I right? Am I, and it was always my fault. And that was kind of gone, that kind of fuzziness and lack of clarity to suddenly realize like, no, actually, when I look deep inside the wisdom of my body, I know what I need, and I know what I want, and I know what is right for me. I know what is my truth. Even though somebody is trying to gaslight me, I know what is true for me, right? So that brought this real confidence that I suddenly have that I never had before. Um, but again, not this posturing confidence, but just this sense of like, no, I'm good. I know what I want. I know what I deserve. I know that I matter, um, and I gonna go and reach for it, right? And then yeah, I guess that took like another year, I suppose, to even find my feet, because it is also a very confusing situation when suddenly you kind of wake up and everything is different, and it's like you're putting you're putting your shoes on and you realize your foot grow one size and the shoes no longer fit, and you're like, oh, what do I do now? um, I have to learn to do everything differently. So it is very confusing and scary, because we just don't know. We like children learning to walk for the first time. Um, and that was also the time when things kind of started to arrange for myself within my, let's say, physical reality. So I already kind of decided to leave my job. I was doing a PhD and I was thinking maybe to moving into academia. But I realized that I can no longer do that. I can no longer go back to the work, to my previous job, even though, the pull was really strong because it was what I knew to do well, what I was successful at, what I was getting a lot of, money and recognition for. Um, and instead, I had to face a total unknown and actually not having a clue what else to do with my life, right? And it was very scary moment, but I remember thinking like, I've got to do that. I cannot come back to what was, and I can no longer live in the way that I used to live. It's just not an option. There was just this like a no from my, it's not gonna happen, right? My body was like, nah. And I was like, okay, I honor you and value you and I value your wisdom. So I guess we're gonna go and do something else. And it was a very scary moment, but once I made that decision, weirdly, things in my life started to realign themselves around that. So, by accident, I kind of find this job, doing a bit of tutoring at uni. That meant that, I could work like, 15 hours a week to cover my basic needs. I started to think about, developing my own practice and helping others to um, on that journey really. So really things started to align in a way that, sometimes I think we think like, oh, if I change this and that, then things gonna get better and I can maybe find a different job, whatever. But actually it's about making that step, that decision, and then things just realign by themselves. It's kind of weird how it happens. And I think what's, next for me on this journey, it is really to, expand my own capacities and expand my own joy and pleasure of living this life. Um, and working towards my purpose and my meaning in life, what I feel, really fuels me, is really important to me and meaningful, which, it is working with other people and kind of supporting other people. I do feel strongly about that. I feel strongly about, creating a more um, balanced and compassionate world for everybody, right? So there is this kind of social change element that I feel strongly about, and I feel, I want to dedicate my life to that. In an alignment of knowing that, this is what my soul is calling for. So, this is kind of my long journey, but you can see, there was some distinct steps, and maybe you can recognize for yourself where you are on this journey, what maybe are the next steps for you. Um, maybe you recognize that you are in this frustrating place of like, no, something needs to change now because I'm done of feeling crap. I also offer support if that's where you are. You can book a discovery call with me, a consultation call, and we can have a little bit of a chat about what I offer and how I kind of guide people on their journey. And likewise, let me know in the comments if this video was helpful. Like and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to hear from you, and I hope you have a great day.